everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for our college essay writing workshop. It's hard to believe that this school year is nearing an end, and as you know, we have some meetings planned for next week where we're going to talk about what you can do over the summer to stay on track with your college search and application process. We'll be providing you with some dates for summer application workshops, and of course, a main component of the application is your college essay. In addition to the other members of the College Counseling Office, as you can see, we are very fortunate to have some guests here this evening to share their insights, and I'd like to just take a moment to introduce them. Mr. Robert Cusella is an Associate Director of Admission at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, where in addition to admission and financial aid counseling, he oversees the web marketing initiatives for undergraduate recruitment. He got his undergraduate degree from St. Joe's and is now in the process of finishing up his master's in writing studies. Through his program, he's writing a collection of personal essays on growing up in an age of connection and disconnection. I'm sure you're getting some new material for that, given the situation that we're in. We're also joined by Ms. Candace Hightower, who we first met last fall when she visited Morristown Baird as our St. Joseph's University representative. She's also the primary reader of our applications. Ms. Hightower is also a graduate of St. Joe's, and before joining the admissions staff, spent a year volunteering at Link Community School in Newark. You also heard that we're joined by Mr. Marmo, of course, who's making this all happen. So you'll hear from him towards the end of the presentation when we turn things over to question and answer. So for now, your video and audio will remain off during the presentation. However, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Simply raise your hand through the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, and Mr. Marmo will call on you. But again, we ask you to hold off until the end when we get to that portion of the presentation. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Cusella.
Awesome. Well, thank you and good evening, everybody. It is wonderful to be here with you virtually, of course, and kind of help you start learning a little bit more about the college essay. Of all the kind of different components that go into your application for colleges, oftentimes that college essay is the most kind of confusing and perplexing in terms of how it is used by colleges and universities when you are applying throughout your college search process. So hopefully this evening I'll be able to give you just a little bit of background and a little bit of insight into kind of what this college essay means and how it is used by colleges and universities. So just to kind of set the groundwork for this evening, I kind of have three main goals up on the screen here to just kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about this evening. Number one, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of how colleges use your essay to make admission decisions. You will be able to identify some tips for writing a successful essay. And we will kind of give you some pointers on brainstorming your own essay. Whether you already have ideas of your own, or maybe you've dabbled in, a draft here or there, or taking some notes, we will kind of be able to provide you some guidance and resources, whether you are completely lost and confused, or whether you have an idea and you just want to make sure that you are on the right path. So before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of everything here, I want to just kind of lay the groundwork for kind of three caveats before I get into kind of the meat of the presentation here. And so I always like to start every single presentation that I do on the admissions process with this disclaimer that admissions is an art, it is not a science. How one school may, do things as it relates to, deadlines and reading and evaluating an application and when they want certain things due or the different requirements they have. All those things for one school are going to be completely different, more likely than not, from other schools that you're going to be applying to. And just because one school may do things a certain way doesn't mean that that's universal for every other school that you're interested in. And so it's really important, as you go through this process, is to first take a deep breath and relax. I know that this can be, an incredibly stressful part of your young life. In the current climate and circumstances we find ourselves in, are only kind of adding to that stress and anxiety and uncertainty. But I just want you to know that at the end of the day, this college search should be fun. It should be eye-opening. It should allow you to get to know yourself better. Hopefully discern a little bit more about what you are interested in, about the type of person you're hoping to become, after high school, and to find that school or set of schools that are going to help you find that best version of who you are meant to be. It's also really important to keep in mind that there's no perfect college essay. And so if you're kind of heading into this process thinking that you need to write, a Pulitzer Prize caliber winning college essay, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. There is no perfect piece of writing out there. And I think, hopefully as we, go through this presentation, you'll get a little bit better of an understanding of what the college search and what the college essay really is about. But don't think that this has to be a perfect piece of writing, because it doesn't. In colleges and universities, we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for an honest and authentic slice of who you are as an individual. So let's jump in here and talk a little bit about the college essay. So as you are, starting to figure out the types of schools that you are going to be applying to, there are two different types of essays that you may be asked to write, depending on the schools that you are interested in applying to. The first one is a personal statement, and the second one is a supplemental essay. So I'm going to explain briefly what both of those essays entail. And so the personal statement is essentially, when you think of the college essay, it's a personal statement. And so essentially your personal statement, your college essay, is a piece of writing that should hopefully share with the colleges you are applying to an important moment from your life and the values and lessons that you realized from that experience. This is an essay that is very much kind of front and center focused on you as an individual, and should be telling us a story from your life that holds some importance to you, no matter how big or how small that moment may seem or have seemed in the past. With the college essay, the common application, which is a very popular way for the schools that offer the option for you to submit through the common application, their personal statements, they offer you 7 different options to choose from, and they all have a 650 word limit. So you basically have roughly about a single page, single space to share your essay with us, right? So you don't have, 17 pages here, for you to share 1 page for each year of your life. That's not what we're looking for. You kind of have 1 page to tell us, in a brief moment, something important about who you are as an individual. And we'll delve a little bit deeper into that as we go through the slide deck here. The second type of essay that you may be asked to write, depending on the schools you're applying to, is going to be what is known as a supplemental essay. Not every college or university requires this. And so as you're starting to, figure out the schools that you're definitely going to be applying to, you want to make sure that you're looking at the application requirements page and jotting down what that school particularly requires. And so for the schools that require a supplemental essay, these are typically going to be school-specific prompts, right? So this isn't going to be asking you explicitly to tell a story about, yourself and your personal experience. It's probably going to be a question that's a little bit more directed towards the institution that you are applying to. Kind of the most popular question on the supplemental essay side of things is a why us, right? Why do you want to attend X, Y, and Z college or university? And so that's where you want to be a little bit more specific to the particular programs or locations or opportunities that attracted you to this school, and why you're submitting your application there. Whereas the personal statement should be focused more on you as an individual, and not necessarily focused in on a particular type of school that you are applying to. For the most part, supplemental essays are going to be much shorter than that 650 words that a personal statement typically is. And so depending on the types of schools you're applying to, you may be writing, one personal statement for that school, or you may be writing, one personal statement and, 3 or 4 additional supplemental statements. And so it really varies depending, again, on what type of school you're looking to apply to and what their application requirements are. And so this is where time management and being organized a little bit really comes in handy. As you start, getting that short list of the schools you're going to be applying to, whether you write some things down on paper, if you have a binder, if you keep kind of something organized electronically, whether that's Google Sheets or something, you definitely want to make sure that you're marking down for each school you're applying to, what do you need to submit to that school, right? And so specifically for the essays, do you need to just submit one personal statement for that school, or do you need to submit a personal statement and a handful of supplemental essays, right? The last thing you want to kind of find yourself in, is an hour before the application is due, and you realize that there were additional essays you needed to write for a particular school. And so nobody wants to, find themselves in that situation. So definitely, do some due diligence as you head into the summer here, and get ready for the fall as it relates to the specific requirements for the schools you're interested in applying to. So what is the purpose of your common application personal statement? What is, kind of the purpose of a college essay in general? First and foremost, it should showcase your writing skills, right? Colleges and universities, we're going to be using this as a writing sample, right? To kind of make sure, that we feel comfortable. You have developed kind of a baseline understanding and competency in basic English language arts skills, right? Are you going to be able to, enter that college campus in the fall and be able to do well in those introductory classes, based on the expectations that, your college professors are going to have. And so we're definitely, looking at the style of your writing and making sure that we feel confident you're going to be able to be successful at each of our campuses, depending on what schools you'll be applying to. Second, this essay should provide insight into your personality and your interests. It should convey your goals, beliefs, values, or achievements, that you have accumulated during your young lives so far. And so you really want to make sure that this is an opportunity to give us a flavor of yourself by looking at your application as a whole, and kind of seeing what is it about me that may not be, evident from my application materials, whether that is the actual application itself when it maybe comes to demographic information, if you are taking into consideration your transcript and or test scores, if you're looking at your resume, right? Those are all important pieces of information, that help us get a sense of who you are. But where are the cracks between those lines of your application, your test scores, your transcripts, right? What are we not getting from you as it relates to your personality? That's what you want to be putting into this college essay, something that we're not able to tell just by reading all your other application materials that you will be submitting to us. So I kind of bolded this out here, but your college essay is your chance to tell us something about yourself that we cannot know from your transcript, test scores, or resume. And this is really, really important. If you, use your essay to kind of just rehash, your resume, it's a wasted opportunity, right? Your resume, your test scores, your transcripts, those aren't always going to show us, a passion for, stand-up comedy, or how you are really, really, really interested in studying astrophysics, or how you have a deep love of literature, but you're interested in studying mathematics, right? So we want to make sure that your college essay is kind of pulling back the curtains behind the transcript, behind the test scores, behind the resume, and bringing us into a moment in your life, or a few moments, that really illustrate for the people reading your application something that's important to you as an individual. So again, I put this sentence here on kind of a red background to really emphasize how important this is. In that you're taking an opportunity to use your college essay, to tell us something we can't know by looking at all of your other application materials. So, who's reading your essay? I think a lot of times there is, you are putting all this time and effort, right, into your application materials, and then you hit that submit button, and it kind of goes into, the black hole of the internet, right? And where does it go? And so, typically, kind of what happens after you hit submit is that application is received by the college you're applying to. There's probably some sort of, application coordinating team that goes through, compiles documents, make sure that, we kind of have all the files we need for you ready. And then when it actually comes time to reading your application, this is where there's a huge variety, in different ways of how, colleges and universities are going to be making admission decisions. But for the most part, most colleges and universities across the country are going to use some sort of kind of committee reading system. And so what that means is there's going to be kind of some multiple layers that your application is going to go through once it's submitted to the schools you're applying to. And so first and foremost, there's going to be some sort of kind of first read of your application. And so specifically at St. Joe's, our admission team, all of our admission counselors are assigned kind of a primary geographic market that they are responsible for, right? And so this evening, I'm joined by my colleague, Candace Hightower, who is the admission counselor for all of you coming from Morristown Beard. And so if you decide to apply to St. Joe's, Candace is going to be that first set of eyes that kind of does an initial read of your application, which includes your essay. She's going to be making some notes, highlighting things that are great, highlighting maybe some questions we have. And depending on that first read, it's going to go, on a kind of variety of different tracks throughout our reading funnel. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of applications that a college is going to be reviewing is going to be going to an admission committee at the end of the day. And so this committee consists of very real human beings who, typically it's going to include the territory manager, kind of that first person who read your application, in addition to senior admission officers. Sometimes there will be faculty from the university. Sometimes administrators from the university will also be involved in reading your application. And so what that means is practically, it's going to be almost downright impossible, right, to figure out who exactly is reading your application. Because, there are going to be anywhere, from minimum 2 people, anywhere to upwards of, 10, 15, 20 different people who may be looking at and making comments on your application. And so how you want to approach your college essay is making sure at the end of the day, your essay is able to articulate clear thinking, good writing, and originality, as well as that personal reflection, that personal story piece. Because those are traits that, regardless of the story you're telling, are going to appeal to a wide variety of different viewers. At the end of the day, writing is such a subjective, medium, right? What you think might be, a great book, somebody else may not think is as wonderful. And so it's really important to know, that not everybody may agree, on what makes great writing. And so, as long as you enter the process, with a clear mind and, kind of submitting your, strongest piece of writing, that really focuses in on who you are as an individual, as a teenager, as a son, as a daughter, as a brother, as a sister, as a coworker, as a teammate, whatever it may be. Those are the feelings, those are the emotions, and those are the essays that are going to have the highest amount of impact to all the different people who ultimately may be reading your essay. So how important is your essay, right? You submitted your application, it's been reviewed, by, a handful of different people. But in the grand scheme of things, right? How important is it, how important does your college essay play when, college decisions are ultimately made? Again, this is going to vary greatly amongst the different types of schools that you're applying to. However, the 2 bullet points on the screen here, I think are really important to keep in mind as you're going through this process. A great, fantastic, wonderful essay is not going to automatically get you admitted to the school you're interested in attending. If you have academic inconsistencies, or if you are significantly below the academic profile where that school typically admits students, right? And so if the rest of your application isn't the strongest, one essay isn't going to automatically get you in the door. However, a really poorly written essay, an essay that has shows little care, little time or effort has been put into it, is a really quick way to kind of either raise some flags for concern or totally get you out of consideration, even if you are a really strong, academically successful student, depending on the types of schools that you may be applying to. At the end of the day, most colleges and universities are going to be basing their admission decisions primarily off of your high school transcript, as well as a secondary factor, test scores, if they are required by that institution. What the essay does, however, is it gives us some insight and it gives us some context and background into the type of student who you are and those intangible characteristics that you will bring, should you end up at that particular institution. So hopefully, this gives you a little bit of an idea of, where the essay falls within the hierarchy of, college application review, right? It's not an automatic in, even if you, have some, academic, success on your transcript, but it is a really quick way, to kind of get your application pushed to the side if it just shows a lack of care or a lack of attention was put into it. I always like to joke, that if admission counselors are good at anything in our profession, it's detecting insincerity. And so it's really, really easy for us to tell the essay, that was written in the last minute, compared to the essay, that went through, 2 or 3 different revisions, and that there was some true care and time taken, to think and reflect and compose, an essay to the best of your ability. All right. So I'm going to kind of pause here for a second. I had shared with your guidance staff 2 brainstorming exercises that, while we won't be doing this evening because of the virtual format, I did just want to kind of give you, 2 exercises, whether you've received them yet or not, that are really helpful as you start heading into thinking about your college essay. And so these 2 exercises come from collegeessayguy.com, which is a really fantastic resource by a gentleman named Ethan Sawyer, whose whole kind of has developed a whole profession in the college essay writing game. And so the 2 exercises, the values exercise and the essence objects exercise, are really great tools, especially if you have no idea what you want to write your essay on yet. That will hopefully give you a little bit more background and a little bit more perspective on what we are looking for as it relates to your college essay. And so the values exercise essentially is going to ask you to look at a wide range of different values, whether that is friendship, intellectual curiosity, being financially successful, care for the environment, family, friendship, whatever it may be, all these different values, and to start to help you kind of whittle down what are the values at this point in your life that you are really, really, passionate about developing, or, hold at a premium in your life. Because those values are going to kind of be the driving force behind those personal statements, where we're able to kind of see in action who you are as an individual. The essence objects exercise is going to ask you, to take a few moments and to think of all the different kind of physical, tangible places you kind of have within your life, right? And so, are there any objects that you have that hold an important value to you, right? Are there objects that you would be heartbroken if they were lost or stolen or broken? Are there objects that you see every day, right? Is it something, on a dresser in your room? Is it something that was in your locker at school? Is it something kind of rattling around in the backseat of your car? Is it a gift from a parent or a grandparent or a best friend? Is it, something that holds value to you, something that is physical, something that is tangible, something that you can see, smell, hold, taste, touch. And are you able to kind of, come up with a list of these different objects in your life, and tell us a story behind that object, right? And does that object or set of objects reflect or relate in any way to the values that you hold important in your life? And so when you're able to kind of start connecting tangible objects that may have a story behind them, that may also be reflective of values that are important in your life, that's where you're kind of getting, on a really strong path to writing a college essay that's going to stand out and be personal and be unique to who you are as an individual. And so again, these are available online, and they are really helpful exercises. Again, especially if you may still have no idea what you want to write your college essay on. And if you fall in that boat right now, that is okay. Breathe, relax. You have plenty of time, to start figuring out, what you may be interested in writing your college essay on. So we're going to jump into some writing tips now, to kind of just give you a little bit of hindsight and background, into kind of the big token items that make for successful college essays. And so I kind of alluded to this a few moments ago, but take your time, right? The strongest essays that we read as an admission office year after year come from students who have taken a considerable amount of time to reflect, write, and revise the essay. I think one of the most challenging things as it relates to this college essay is that for the vast majority of high school students across the country, this is ultimately, or probably, the first time you are being asked to send in a piece of writing that is about you as an individual. That is about reflection, that is about discernment, that is about kind of taking, a look at, where you've been, where you've come from, what you aspire to do and be in your life, and write about that in some, meaningful, compelling way that allows the readers to get a better personal sense of who you are as an individual and as a human being. And this isn't going to happen overnight. Good, strong writing takes time. And so you definitely want to make sure, that you're making a good impression, especially if there's, that one school out there that, is your first choice, or you would love to be a part of that community. You want to make a good first impression. By the time you get to actually submitting your college application, a lot of your application is set in stone, right? The transcript, it is what it's going to be. Your test scores, for the most part, they are what they are. Maybe you have a chance to take, a test later in September or October or November. But for the most part, you're not going to be, boosting your score, by hundreds of points, most likely. With your resume, right? By the time senior year comes around, maybe you can join, one or two additional clubs or organizations if that's something that is truly important to you. But for the most part, your involvement, your working experiences, those are going to kind of be, set in stone as well. The essay is where you kind of have a blank page to make it your own, and to really, use those 650 words to give us a story, to give us a few moments, that reflect back on who you are, what you love, and where you want to go. But that's only going to happen, if you take your time to kind of reflect on, what is important to you, and not just kind of, hammer out one draft and then use that, for your final essay. Oops, going backwards. The next thing, identifying your values. This will be really helpful in that values exercise, in helping you, kind of discern, what it is in your life right now that is most important to you. So whether that's intellectual challenge, valuing friendship, a thirst for adventure, we want to see these values in action, right? We want to be able to kind of see and feel and hear in your own words what it is about the values in your life and why they are so important to you. And those come from stories, those come from moments. And so you definitely want to make sure that by the time we get to the end of your essay, that we have a sense of who you are and what you are, interested in pursuing as you head off to college. Those are what's going to make the most impactful essays. Is really kind of allowing us to kind of, get to the core of who you are as an individual, and get a better sense of what it is that you value and cherish in your life. The next thing here is choosing your topic wisely, right? And so you have 650 words for this personal statement. And so you want to make sure that you're kind of honing in on one moment, or, 2 or 3 moments at most, that allow us to see your identity and your growth and how you've changed or adapted to whatever challenges or successes that you have gone through in your lives so far. And so you definitely want to make sure, that this essay is something that is going to fit into 650 words, obviously, but that it's something that is important to you, right? It's going to be really easy to tell if, the essay you write is something that you truly care about and are passionate about writing, or if it's something that just feels like a chore and it's just another checklist item that, you need to get off of your to-do list. And so you want to make sure as you, start thinking about, what different topics and experiences you may be interested in pursuing, that you're choosing that topic wisely. And so I'm going to walk you through some essay topics that don't work, and some essay topics that have personally worked for me as a reader in the past. And so up on the screen here, I've kind of outlined a few essays, or types of essays that you should, to the best of your ability, try to avoid. I mentioned the first one previously, and that's summarizing your resume, right? If you just kind of rehash what's already on your resume, it's a wasted opportunity, because typically by the time a reader gets to your actual personal statement, we've already seen your resume, right? We know your work involvement, we know what extracurriculars you were involved in, and so you want to make sure that you're using that essay to give us a story, give us a moment, and not just, regurgitate information we've already read on your application. The second essay you want to be a little bit cautious about are sports essays, right? I know that sports are a huge part for high school students in their lives, if you are an athlete. And so there is nothing inherently or intrinsically wrong with writing an essay about sports. Where students typically fall into the trap is when you can basically kind of just replace your name with another student's name and have the same exact essay. And so typically during reading season, kind of in the midst of, November and December, admission counselors are reading anywhere from 50, to maybe even 100 essays a day, or applications a day. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're using this essay as an opportunity to set yourself apart and stand out. And so I cannot tell you the amount of essays I've read about a student telling a story about how they, got cut from, an athletic team, or they lost the big championship game, but they've learned to, always overcome adversity, right? I understand, we understand that those are, sometimes painful moments in your life, but there are thousands of high school students across the country as well who have gone through those same exact moments and experiences and write about them in very, very similar ways. And so if sports is something that's really important to you, and you are thinking of writing your essay on a sports related topic, you really want to make sure that kind of the story of that essay is something that's totally unique and personal to who you are as an individual. I think the biggest rule of thumb to kind of go by, regardless of the topic that you may be writing, is that you should be able to drop your essay in the hallway of your school with no kind of, name or identifying information. Somebody should be able to read that essay and know exactly who wrote it, because that story and that experience could only come from one person. And so If you want to write about sports, you want to work a little bit harder to find what is your unique angle, what is your unique perspective. What is it about that particular sports game, or not making the team, or whatever it may be? What is it that's so important and foundational to who you are, and how can you craft it to kind of stand out in your own unique way? The third type of essay that's really popular are students who may have done a service trip or love volunteering, and those are all wonderful endeavors. But kind of the trap behind those essays sometimes is that students, when they're writing about going on an abroad experience, or writing about volunteering at a homeless center or a soup kitchen or a nursing home, is that the essay becomes more of, look at me, look at all the wonderful things I have done for people less fortunate than me, and not about the actual act and change you experience. And so if you want to write an essay focused in on, volunteering or service or giving back to your community, focus in on one or two particular moments that stood out to you, right? If you want to write about this topic, we really want to see your growth and change, right? How did this experience change you as an individual? Right? Did you learn, something new about maybe inequality, in the world? Did you learn a different sense of who you are as an individual? Did your values change because of this service experience? You definitely want to make sure, if you're writing about these experiences, it's not coming off as, I'm so privileged, look at all the great things I've done. But it's, I had this experience and it really changed me, or helped open my eyes to seeing life and the way, other people may live their lives. And so that's the vein that you want to go in if you're, going the service route or the volunteer route. Otherwise, the essays just fall flat if you're just talking about how great you are because, you've had all these great privileges in your life. The fourth type of essay you want to, steer away from is any illegal or illicit behavior. And I think I would just sum that up with the caveat: if you write an essay that you do not feel comfortable letting a parent or a guardian or your college counselor read it, it's probably not going to be the best topic to submit for your college essay at the end of the day. And then lastly, the meta essay or the anti-essay. Every year there's a student or two who tries to think so out of the box because they want to stand out, and be super, super unique. And they try to write an essay that either is one sentence, or they'll just submit a blank piece of paper, or, they will write some sort of essay that maybe is in a it's a poem, or it's in the shape of a flower, or something that's really creative and out of the box, but misses kind of the whole purpose of sharing a moment from your life, and how we've seen you grow and change as an individual. I can promise you, in college, there are going to be plenty of moments to experiment and go really outside of the box, especially in your first year English classes. But when it comes to your college essay, you want to keep it personal, but you also want to make sure that you're writing an essay. Don't submit one sentence saying, this is my college essay, or, don't submit, a whole page of you saying how you're going to write the most creative college essay in the world. And by the time we get to the end of the essay, we've learned absolutely nothing about you. And so, you definitely want to make sure that you're not trying to kind of be so kind of whimsical and clever that you miss the whole purpose of the essay to begin with. So what topics have worked? On the screen here, I've thrown up 4 different kind of really quick snapshots of a few essays that I've personally read during my time as an admission reader that stood out to me in a really meaningful way. What I do not want you to do this evening is look at these 4 different essays and say, oh, I need to write an essay just like that now. Because that kind of, defies the whole purpose of, something that comes genuinely from you. But I think, the second bullet point here, essays don't have to be these big, crazy, things in your lives, right? Nobody has to die. There doesn't have to be a crazy big explosion or a fallout between friends. Sometimes the strongest essays that we read are often the simplest or the quietest. And so the second bullet point that I have on the screen here came from a student, I believe 2 years ago at this point, whose whole college essay was just him sitting on the beach in Oregon, kind of looking out into the ocean as the waves were rolling in and out. His dog was right next to him. And he was just reflecting on his life and where he had come so far. Talking about how he knew he was going to be leaving the state and the home that he grew up in, for 17 years of his life. And the essay really just talked about the uncertainty and the fears that he had about kind of leaving this, idyllic, really beautiful, Oregon coast, and going off to a new adventure, right? Nothing crazy happened in it, but it was just a really simple, quiet essay of, a young man sitting on a beach reflecting about his life. The last bullet point here, kind of in a similar vein, was a student who talked about really having a love for writing, and used actual journal entries from her journal as little inserts that, kind of went through a chronology of, different moments in her life, and the excitement, but also, a little bit of, fear and uncertainty that comes with, going off to college. So again, these are by no means kind of cookie cutter templates of what your essay should be like. But what all 4 of these essays have in common is that they are super specific to the individual writing them. Whether it is the tone of the writing or the topic of the essay, there is something from these essays for me that really stood out as authentic, that stood out as, mature, and stood out as reflective, and being just a really kind of nice, tidy, honest snapshot of, where each of these 4 students were, in their lives at that moment, as they, went through, writing their college application. And so that kind of ties me into the next writing tip here, and that's being authentic. Right? Write from your heart, not from your head. I think a lot of times there's a lot of anxiety with the college essay and thinking that, you have to be this perfectly packaged student, who has 0 flaws, who knows all the answers to everything, and is going to, immediately bring about incredible change and excitement, should you be at that particular school, right? We're not looking for you to have all the answers in the world, right? You are 17, 18 years old. If you claim to have all the answers in the world, I'm going to personally start asking questions because I don't have all the answers in the world, right? And so it is okay to be honest, and to be reflective with us. So don't feel like you kind of have to package yourself into this perfect bow of a student, because nobody is perfect, right? We all have, great things about us. We all have things, in our lives where we have areas to improve in. And we want to see that. We want that authenticity. We want that reflection. We want that honesty. That is what makes really strong essays stand out from the rest of them. Do not feel like you have to have the answers to cure cancer or bring about world peace. We're really just looking for, a snapshot in your life that gives us an honest and true image of who you are and what is important to you as an individual. I can guarantee you, we are not looking for specific talking points, right? There is no checklist of, oh, I need this student to talk about X, Y, and Z in order for us to admit him. We really just want to be able to open up the door a little bit wider, and get a better, more authentic sense of who you are as an individual. All right. And then next tip here is keeping your reader engaged. Typically, if you're lucky, the people reading your application, maybe they're reading it for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes at the most, right? There's a lot of components that go into an application. And if we're expected to read, 50 applications a day, we don't have 45 minutes, to lounge around, sip some Earl Grey tea, and line by line, leisurely read an essay. And so you want to make sure that, you are kind of keeping us engaged with your writing style, right? You want to kind of start off strong and fast and draw us in, right? Every sentence should be, having us ask, what's going to happen next, right? I'm really curious. I want to know, where is this story going? It's also important that, you proofread. And I believe that's on my next slide here. Oh, nope. Sorry about that. But you definitely want to make sure that you're proofreading as well. A misspelled word is not going to kill you, but errors add up, right? And they don't leave a positive impression. This kind of, again, comes back to the question that we're going to be asking is, did you put some time and effort into this, right? And if the essay is written really soppily, or there's, just a lot of errors, that's going to stand out. Another thing is, avoid name dropping specific schools, especially if you're going to be using the Common Application. Don't feel like you have to use your essay to address that school specifically, at least in your personal statement. This is an opportunity to, tell us a story from you as an individual that can be used at every single school you apply to. I believe on the Common App there is, you are able to kind of submit different versions to different schools, but you don't have to include St. Joseph's University at the end of your essay or something. It happens more often than you think, but there is nothing funnier, than getting to the end of an essay that was really great and the student says, for all those reasons, I'm really, really excited to go to Penn State University, when the student applied to St. Joe's, right? And so again, is that going to kill your chances from getting in? Probably not. But it doesn't show, a lot of effort and time and care was put into crafting your essay. So to kind of wrap things up here, I have two last slides before we get into the questions. So to kind of just leave you with some lasting bullet points here. And so the least interesting essays that we read each year sound like 1,000 others, are about ideas or generalities. Seems like, someone just has a thesaurus open and is, kind of trying to sound smarter than they are, or they take a long time to get to the point if they even get there. On the reverse, the most compelling essays we will read each year sound like the real words of a real person living a real life. They are often unexpected or surprising, and they sound like a story that could only be written by one person, and that is a person we would like to meet. I think the greatest test that I personally use, when I'm reading college essays, is if I get to the end of the essay and I think to myself, wow, I really want to be able, to sit down and have a conversation with that student. That's when I know that an essay, really hit me, in some emotional place, and makes me want to, it's at those moments, right, that we're really able to kind of get a sense of, who is behind that application, that allows us to see you as more than just a GPA or a test score. So that is all that I have for you. I am more than happy to take any questions that you may have here. And so, feel free to raise your hand. Myself and Candace, we are both here to, answer any questions that may be on your mind. But before we head into the questions, I would like Candace, if you're able to maybe just share, a few things that you've learned kind of this past cycle with reading applications, anything that has stood out to you, in terms of applications, maybe, an essay or two that really worked for you, or maybe an essay that really didn't work, that can kind of provide some advice for the students on the webinar here.
Yeah, awesome. So I was thinking about some of the essays that really stood out to me, and there were a lot of really good essays, but I think some of my favorite really come down to, I think that there's something that can be really beautiful in the mundane. So one that stuck out to me immediately was one student talked about how he sort of got this identity of wearing a fanny pack around his town. And it had to do with the fact that he wasn't organized and really wanted to take steps to make sure that all of his, everything was sort of in order. So he had his fanny pack, and in it he had a planner and pens and everything else that he needed. all leading up to, I ended up interviewing the student and he had the fanny pack on and I immediately knew who it was. So it was a really great way to sort of start our interview and also a really great insight to see who the student was, and then also seeing that it was super authentic to who he was as well, was something that I really enjoyed. Another one that stood out to me was a student who talked about her nickname and how it sort of changed throughout the years. It was hilarious. It was a hilarious essay, but everything doesn't need to be hilarious. But it was really cool to see how her nickname when she was younger to how she was older sort of also went through a lot of like changes and growth as she did. So that was one of my favorites as well. One that I thought would have been like a really cool and like unique essay if it would have like landed right was a student who talked about how her friends really expect her to sort of be like the person to take control over the aux cord, like when they're in the car or like going places. And then she had blurbs of what her playlists are like, but it ended up being more about like the artists and not so much about the student. So I got to see like, oh, like the student has a really great music taste, but I wish I would have had a little bit more of like why we chose those artists, or I guess the importance of like both of on each of these playlists. So I thought it was like really close, but I just like really wish I had more from the student. I wanted to sort of talk to them and sort of see like, why'd you choose these playlists to sort of talk about? And then one that I really enjoyed, it was pretty short, but it was really engaging and I think a nice twist on that sports story. And it was a student who talked about sitting behind the score table for his church's basketball league. And sort of the lessons learned from sort of being an observer, which I thought was really cool and unique. Instead of talking about the lessons that I learned on the court, sort of the lessons that I learned by watching somebody else on the court, which was really cool. I really enjoyed that one.
Awesome. Yeah, they all sound wonderful. I would say a note on the humor and using humor in your essay. I think a good rule of thumb is if people in your everyday life tell you you're genuinely funny, feel free to use humor, in your essay. But if people don't tell you you're funny, maybe steer away from the humor because it's probably not going to land well. And it is okay, if you are not intrinsically, a funny human being. There are many people out there who, don't seek, laughter. And so I think a lot of times, students will try to add humor to their essay and it doesn't always work. So, if people, tell you on a regular basis that, you're really funny, go for it. If they don't, maybe steer away.
Definitely would agree with that.
We do have a question from Robert. Robert, give me 1 second. I'm going to allow you to talk. If you would follow the instructions on your screen to unmute yourself. Rob, you should be able to hear me now, and we should be able to hear you.
Yeah, so first of all, just thank you guys for doing this. I know it's got to be kind of different than how you typically do it, being virtual, and I think that's kind of why you're not getting as many questions. It is a little bit awkward. But I wanted to ask why you two kind of chose to work for St. Joseph's University and what stuck out about it to you. I understand that Ms. Hightower, you did attend St. Joseph's, is that correct?
Yes.
And so what was kind of like your experience? What's your experience been kind of being a student there and working there?
Yeah. So I absolutely loved my experience at St. Joe's, which is why I decided to come back. But one of the things that really stuck out to me personally is I think that everyone has their own experience at St. Joe's and everyone gets involved in different things. And that's sort of what makes me fall in love with the university over and over and over again. When I was a sophomore, I became an RA and I was an RA for 3 years for freshmen, which was really an awesome experience. But I also got to see all of my residents get involved in campus as well. And by seeing them take part in different clubs that I didn't even know happened at St. Joe's, allowed me more time to sort of learn about the university and really get to love it in a different way and appreciate the things that campus has to offer that maybe not every student knows about.
Thank you.
No problem. Also, Robbie attended.
I did, yes.
What
yeah.
about just kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think I echo everything that Candace, just said. I think of recently, given the just crazy times we're living in right now, I think what has made me, love St. Joe's even more than I've already have is just, the community rallying around, you know, going virtual. We this past weekend we, had commencement for our students, and we weren't able to do that, in person for them, unfortunately. And that's, a huge part, of St. Joe's, and kind of celebrating our seniors and then kind of going off to the next stage of their lives. And I just think, the passion and the dedication and the commitment that the entire university community has shown in, really making this past weekend and transitioning just in general, to living and working and studying remotely, just kind of renews my faith, each time in kind of the university's, real commitment to, at our core, our students, and making sure we're providing them the best experience that we possibly can, given the circumstances. But, I think the community on St. Joe's is incredibly supportive, is incredibly passionate. And, we don't always like to, brag about ourselves. But I think, every once in a while it's kind of nice, to brag about yourselves. And I think, of this kind of past semester, these past few weeks, there's been a lot to just be really proud about, being a part of the St. Joe's community.
Thank you.
Peter, if you follow your on-screen instructions, you should be able to unmute yourself now and ask your question.
Hey guys, once again, thanks for speaking to us tonight. I just kind of had a question about kind of like the style of the writing. So, you touched on that length, right? That 650 word length, and how some students will, just write a sentence or try to do something so unique where it doesn't work. If you do get an essay that's 800 words or something that isn't really following those guidelines, is that just an automatic, like, you'll stop reading it? If it's too long, you'll stop at the 650? What's that process kind of look like?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't live in the Common App side of the world every single day, but I believe, like, if you're copying and pasting your essay, like, it will automatically stop at 650. There are, students who will say, hey, can I send you, a PDF if it's a little longer? And that's fine. But I think the general rule of thumb is, if you're going to 700, 800 words, that's fine. I would say don't submit 2 pages, don't submit 3 pages, because it's just not going to get read, just because there's just so many applications, the counselors have to get through. And I think what we're really looking for, especially with that 650 time frame, is, are you able to kind of organize your thoughts in a coherent manner, that's, not winding and going on and on and on forever. So, if you're at 651 words, is the counselor automatically going to stop? Probably not. But you want to make sure that you have a really strong opening and that the essay continues to draw that reader in, because if the essay opens, I will always overcome, any challenge in my life. I've heard that, thousands of times at this point. I'm probably not going to be as interested in continuing onward because I kind of already know where this essay's headed.
I would just add that you are right, Robbie, in that the Common App itself will not allow you to put in more than the 650 words. So
perfect.
It takes care of it for you.
Yeah, thank you. That made a lot of sense. And thanks again for presenting. It was very helpful.
I have a question while we have you guys. Obviously this junior class is in a unique situation in that, they haven't been able to visit as many campuses as they had hoped. And we're not quite sure, what lies ahead in terms of things getting a little bit back to normal in terms of their college search. So I was just wondering if you have, any advice for them. They know that there are plenty of virtual events on all of the colleges' websites, but is there any advice that you could offer in terms of, them kind of arriving at those good fit schools without the traditional opportunities that they would have normally had at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the first thing is, to find out who your admission counselor is at that school. It's probably going to be really easy to, find the virtual tour or find the webinars that are coming up, and those are all great and good. But every single school is doing those now, right? And we all have, limited bandwidth, and so, we're by no means expecting you to, attend every single virtual event that every single school you're interested in is attending. But I think, what is going to be kind of a good way to, kind of get the ball rolling here and to start forming some connections, virtually, is to reach out to your counselor. Maybe try to set up a one-on-one Zoom, conversation or interview, especially if it's at a school, that you're really interested in. I think that's, going to be just a really strong way, to one, show your, interest in that school, and allow you to just learn about that school in a different way. The counselor is most likely going to be able to, direct you to, or kind of get you in contact, with maybe some current students who, wouldn't mind emailing or setting up their own Zoom call, whether that's, based on, shared interest in majors or geographic location or whatever you may be interested in learning about. I would say, right now, and, this is, at least for St. Joe's, you tell us what we need to give you, because this is all super uncertain, just as much for you guys as it is for us on the other end. We're kind of daily reinventing how we do things. And so we want to know, like, what do you need? What are you looking for that, maybe we're not already providing? And if there has ever been a time in college admissions where we're going to be, more than, attuned to, providing what you need, it's during this time when, our campuses aren't open. So I would say just reach out to your counselor and just get that conversation started. Candace, do you have any pointers, tips?
Yeah, definitely agree with what you said. And even touching on a point that you had a little bit ago is that at least at St. Joe's, a lot of our university is really rallying behind each other during this time. So like, I find it very easy to get students in contact with pretty much anybody they want to talk to. Like, I'm interested in psychology, but also biology and maybe marketing. And I'm like, let me set you up with a professor from each one of those majors. Let me see if I can get in contact with someone who was a double major in maybe two of those areas so that you can get a better sense of what your life would be like on campus. I think that's what's, I guess, missing during this piece of being virtual, that what is it like being there, and anything we can do to make you feel like you have an understanding of what it's like to be there is definitely our number one priority.
Well, again, I just want to thank Mr. Cusella and Ms. Hightower for joining us tonight. That was so incredibly helpful as our students head into the summer with their application work ahead of them. Just as a reminder to everyone, we do have a class meeting on Tuesday. We'll be meeting in our caseload, so in smaller groups with your individual counselor. And again, we'll be talking about a checklist for the summer, talking about how we will be available to provide support for you on your application as well as your essay over the summer, and some of the other things that can help move things along. And we'll also be providing you with more information about the college essay, including the essay prompts for both the Common App and the Coalition application, as well as those exercises that Mr. Cusella mentioned. And so with that, does anybody else have anything to add? Any of my colleagues? We're all good? All right. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. And thank you again to our panelists. We really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Hope everybody's safe and healthy. And, if you ever have any questions, Candace is the rep for, your school here. So, don't hesitate to reach out.
And Candace, we look forward to seeing you in some form,
Yes.
Either back on campus in the fall or at least virtually with our then seniors.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Okay, great. Thanks again.
Okay, bye.
Good night, everyone. This concludes our session. and the meeting will now end.
Thank you, Mr. Marmo.